Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here with Boomerocity, and I've got a little bit of an unusual thing for you guys this time around. As you know, typically I do my interviews directly with the individuals that are on screen or on audio, depending on where you're accessing or how you're accessing my interviews. This time I was invited as a part of a large group of journalists, podcasters, and others to participate in a Q&A session with none other than Ringo Starr. Imagine that. And it was he and T-Bone Burnett, who worked on Ringo's latest album. Talk about that in a moment. And they were presenting the opportunity to all of us to submit questions and they could give answers, thus the Q&A about this new album. The new album, as you'll see the cover behind me, is entitled Look Up. And it's always, as always, Ringo is one to spread peace and love. And the implication of that, of course, is positivity. And so this is a country album of positivity instead of drinking and broke and woman left me or man left me, on and on and on. This is an album of positivity from Ringo Starr. And so this Q&A session took place at the legendary and historic Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville. Now there were people in the auditorium listening in on the Q&A, what had happened, just so you know exactly how this works. I'm not going to try to lead you to believe that I submitted the questions and they answered knowing it was me. That was not the case at all. All of us had to submit our questions ahead of time, a day ahead of time. And then we were given a link for those of us who are remote, and there were people from all over the world. I have no idea how many journalists and podcasters there were, but there were quite a few, and they were from all over the world. And all of us submitted questions to be considered to be asked of Ringo and T-Bone. And so for those of us who are remote, we got to click in via Zoom and watch the participation. And then afterwards, we were given the video of the Q&A under the stipulation that we would not use everything in it. So you may see bits and pieces around the globe in various platforms and publications about this Q&A session. Being a man of my word, I am using only a portion of it. And what I will do is I'll come in at the head of each segment, and there's only 2 or 3 segments here. This will be short, and tee up what their answer is referencing. And then that way you kind of know what they're talking about, even though it may probably be more self-explanatory than anything. I think it'd be a lot of fun. If you're a Ringo or Beatles fan, this is definitely a big thing. T-Bone's a great musician, a legend in himself. And it turns out he and Ringo have been friends for quite a while, and they're building on that friendship. But this is a fun album and a fun Q&A. So the lead up into this first answer to the question, Ringo explains his inspiration behind the LP, this new album, Look Up, and gets into how it came about and that type of thing. Here's Ringo explaining that.
He was the inspiration because I met him at this party we were at, and I've met him many times, but this was just getting together. And hi, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, oh, I'm making EPs, and I thought, well, if you've got a song, send me the files. And he sent me the song, and it's the most beautiful country track I've heard in many years. It's so sort of 50s country, and so I thought, well, I'll just make a country EP now. Most of them are like pop rock, and then he came to LA, and we were chatting, and I thought, I'm going to ask him to do an EP. Will he produce it? And then I asked him, do you got any songs? He said, yeah, I got songs, and he had them in his pocket. He said, 9. So I said, well, let's make an album. And that's how it all happened. There was no real plan. It was just bumping into each other, and it ended up here.
Now, in this next answer, Ringo and T-Bone are talking about, oh, well, it's actually T-Bone talking about his friendship with Ringo and how that started. Take a listen to this.
Oh, I love the man.
I was talking to T-Bone.
I don't
Yes.
care who you talk to. I'm answering.
Well,
You can't just point over here.
I'm glad to be getting to be friends with Ringo, I have to say. And I have to say too that, you know, American music, rock and roll, I felt when I was about in 1957, I was 8 years old, 9 years old, and a friend played me a Jerry Lee Lewis record, a whole lot of shaking going on. And I remember listening to it over and over again, rolling around on the floor, laughing at the explosion of freedom and love and just everything that was in that record. And it was very different from Fort Worth in the 50s, which was very, I would say, rigid. You know, it was an uptight kind of scene I was living in. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And by 1959, that whole rock and roll revolution was over. Jerry Lee was disgraced. Elvis was in the army. Little Richard was in the ministry. You know, Buddy Holly had been killed in a plane crash. Eddie Cochran had been killed in a car wreck. And I thought, oh, this isn't what I want to do with my life. It's, you know, that's over. Rock and roll's a fait accompli. And then the Beatles came and played in New York in 1964, February 64. And they gave us back our music at that point. And they opened doors and windows that so many of us have walked through or climbed through over the years. And so I've got this deep gratitude to all those cats, and Ringo in particular. You know, the gift that they've given us, that he's given us, is immeasurable. So, you know, to even get to be friendly with Ringo means a tremendous amount to me, I gotta say.
Now, I know that we think of Ringo Starr as a rock artist, a pop artist, whatever you want to call it. I mean, he and his mates in the Beatles were integral to the rise of rock and roll, but it may surprise you that just like Elvis Presley, Ringo too had a deep love for country music, thus this album. So in this, what you're about to hear here is Ringo's response to the question to explain his love of country music. I think you'll find it very, very fascinating. Check this out.
It's emotional. It's emotional music when I started listening to it. And I'm quite an emotional person myself. So, you know, I like to say in the 50s, every country song was either the wife's left, the dog's dead, or I need some money for the jukebox. It was always a problem. And all those great singers around. I mean, besides Hank Williams, we all start with him, or I did. And, you know, Hank Snow from Canada. It's weird, I remember him so well. He did the eight-wheel train coming down the track. It's going to take him over, it's going to carry him away. He was more country than a lot of country guys. And so, yeah, Kitty Wells, whew, who can sing better than Kitty Wells? All that emotion. And, you know, it was great. So that's why I loved it. But I also loved the blues, and I loved pop music of the day. All those names, Jerry Lee and that. I wanted like that dream as a kid. If I had a voice, I'd like to sound like Jerry Lee, actually, personally, or Al Hibbler. You tell me what's happening. And Eddie Cochran. I have a story about Eddie Cochran that Ringo, Rory and the Hurricanes, which I was part of, we were going to play this gig in Liverpool, and all the local bands were there, but just happened to be that Rory and the Hurricanes, we were the top band. And Eddie Cochran hit the tree, he died. But you know, as teenagers, we were like, Well, you could have waited till after the gig. You know, that's what you like as an 18-year-old. I've had 3 of them myself. I know exactly what it's like. And yeah, all great. Eddie was great. He brought a lot of energy to everything. And Buddy was beautiful.
In this next segment, Ringo talks about what it's like to perform at the Ryman. And if you've never been at the Ryman Auditorium, it's where the Grand Ole Opry originally started. And while I'm talking about the Ryman and the Grand Ole Opry, I'd take this moment to let you know that on February 28th, Ringo will be playing at the Grand Ole Opry for the first time. And as of this recording, there were still seats left. Now, the Opry is over on the east side of Nashville. If you're not familiar with Nashville, it's in a different building than the Ryman. Obviously, the Ryman Auditorium is where it all started, but there's a new, more modern facility over on the east side of Nashville, and much more comfortable, that type of thing. No church pews like it is in the Ryman. But Ringo will be performing there on February 28th, and I encourage you that if you haven't seen Ringo, this is a great time to see him in a great facility there. But in this next segment, Ringo talks about his feelings about performing at the Ryman again. Check this out.
He put the show, but I came to the Ryman first time 10 years ago, something like that. Anyway, I just felt incredible to be at the Ryman because, you know, I came in the country music long before most of you were born. And just to be here is such a blessing, and the vibe here is so great that we ended up spending my 72nd birthday here in the back somewhere. Someone threw the party. The Ryman for me is just, it's a blessing that I can play here. And I feel, you know, an extra little beat in my heart every time I play here.
Yeah,
so far
too.
out.
In this final segment, you'll hear T-Bone talk about the story of who who makes up the band on this album, and presumably on stage. I that wasn't really clear if that's also the stage band, but I think it's a very interesting story, and they mentioned 1 or 2 very famous names in there. So give this a listen. And I'll go ahead and say goodbye now. And as I always ask, would you please hit like? And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. And feel free to share this with your friends. And so until the next go around, next interview, next Q&A, whatever it is I decide to tee up next, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Now here's Ringo and T-Bone for the closing shot. Take care.
You know, the band for the album is basically Daniel Tashin, me, and Dennis Crouch, the bass player. And Ringo played drums on everything. That's the rhythm section, and there are a few other guys that overdub or add something here or there. But so I started with that core rhythm section. And then, you know, Jim Keltner and I have been playing together since 1967.
Yeah, wow.
And I know Ringo and Jim have played together a lot and love each other. Jim holds Ringo. I think they both idolize each other.
Well, he's
really.
my favorite drummer.
Yeah, well, I think and you're his favorite drummer, which is,
Yeah, so it's good.
it works out. But so I called Jim. He said that's an immediate yes. And then I just started calling other people that I've worked with here in town. Paul Franklin on steel is, I think he really is. I've worked with a lot of wonderful steel players over the years, and I think he's the best that's ever been. And he played he played so beautifully on Time on My Hands. You know,
Yeah, I love Time on My
heartbreaking.
Hands.
And you know, he's got that thing that Lloyd Green had, where he just knows. He plays the words. That's another. Ringo plays the words.
I
Keltner
played to
played
the song,
words.
yeah.
All the great musicians play the words. They play the story. They don't just play a beat or a part or I know this lick. It's never about that. It's about what does this line say and how can I score it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
This has been another stellar episode of Boomerocity with your host, producer, and friend, Randy Patterson. The theme music is Roll the Dice by our good friend Quentin Hope, and all rights reserved and used by permission, of course. Post-production is done by Cardinal Sins Productions. The Boomerocity name, logo, and content is copyright protected, so all segments may only be used with written consent by Boomerocity and/or its assignees. You should direct your inquiries to input@boomerocity.com, and the copyright is 2025.